The warehouse lights buzzed out one by one as Officer Logan Briggs stepped into the cold night, 80 crumpled dollars in his pocket and a worry he couldn't shake. Beside him, Raven paused, nose pressed to a wall like something trapped behind it was calling his name. Logan thought he was just buying a forgotten storage unit. But that night, the air shifted, and what Raven uncovered would pull a quiet police officer and a grieving daughter into a battle far bigger than both of them. If you're ready for a story where a single act of honesty can change the fate of a family, and the bravest protector walks on 4 paws, hit subscribe and stay close. You won't want to miss what comes next. A thin veil of mist drifted over the quiet streets, soft as breath on glass. Officer Logan Briggs stepped out of the precinct and pulled his faded navy shirt closer to his chest. The cold had stiffened his fingers, and the long shift had carved a slow ache into his shoulders. At 40, he carried his tall, lean frame with the quiet humility of a man who had spent years doing honest work no one applauded. His short, dark brown hair was still damp from the drizzle, and the faint stubble on his jaw felt rough beneath his hand. He checked his phone out of habit, expecting nothing, and found the message waiting, cold, plain, and heavy. The hospital had changed his mother's medication. It would cost more now, much more. Logan stood there in silence, letting the truth settle like falling ash. His salary already ran thin. The overtime shifts weren't enough, and there was no one else to help. For a long moment, the streetlights hummed quietly above him, and the world felt unbearably wide. Raven nudged his leg. The Bloodhound, 7 years old, reddish-brown fur, patient eyes, solemn posture, stood beside him like a shadow carved from old loyalty. Raven's long ears twitched at the distant sounds of traffic. He gave a soft grunt, the kind that reminded Logan he wasn't alone, not tonight, not ever. "Yeah, boy," Logan whispered, voice low and tired. "Let's go home." They walked toward the parking lot, breath misting in the cold. But halfway down the block, Logan slowed. A cluster of people had gathered outside a row of abandoned storage units, the kind where forgotten lives sat in boxes, waiting for someone desperate enough to look. A man in a reflective vest was shouting numbers, some late-night auction for unclaimed storage lockers. Logan almost walked past. Almost. Then he remembered the message. The bill. The way his mother's voice had trembled the night before. "I'll be okay, Logan. Don't worry about me." But he did worry. It hollowed him out. He reached into his pocket. His thumb brushed the edges of his wallet, thin, weary leather. Inside, only $80. The last of his money before next week's paycheck. It should have been for groceries. Gas. Small things that kept a man standing, yet something in him, tired, cornered, quietly hopeful, made him step toward the crowd. Raven suddenly stiffened, the dog's head lifted, nostrils flaring. He walked forward with unusual urgency, pulling gently at the leash until they stood before a dust-coated metal door marked Unit 43. Raven's breath deepened, his tail rose. He pressed his nose to the gap beneath the door, pawing lightly, as if something inside tugged at him. Logan frowned. "What is it, partner?" Raven huffed again, more insistent this time. Logan felt a thin shiver, not of fear, but of recognition. Raven never reacted without reason. The dog had found missing children, fugitives, lost hikers. His instincts were quiet, deep, and rarely wrong. He looked at the metal door, then at the auctioneer calling out bids. Maybe this was foolish, maybe it was the exhaustion speaking, or maybe in nights like these, a man needed to believe life still offered small mercies. Logan lifted his hand. 80, he called. The crowd turned. Some smirked, some shrugged. No one else bid. A moment later, Unit 43, the forgotten space Raven had chosen, belonged to him. Logan placed his hand on the cold metal door, breathing slowly, the mist curling around his fingers like smoke. Whatever waited inside, he knew one thing with quiet certainty. Tonight, something was shifting. Something had begun. The storage unit smelled of dust and cold metal, the kind of stillness that settles when a place has been forgotten too long. Logan stepped inside, the beam of his flashlight trembling ever so slightly in his hand. The air tasted stale. Old cardboard softened under his boots, collapsing with a whisper. He was tired, bone-tired, but something in Raven's posture kept him moving. The Bloodhound, 7 years old, heavy reddish-brown fur brushing the concrete, walked slowly at first, nose low, ears trailing like curtains of memory. Logan sifted through broken crates and waterlogged boxes without expecting much. A rusted lamp, a child's torn backpack, old bills, life reduced to debris. He breathed in, steadying himself, reminding his heart to quiet down. He had come here with hope, small, fragile, $80 hope, and that was already a heavy enough burden for a man trying to keep his mother alive. Then Raven froze. The dog's body stiffened from tail to chest, muscles coiled beneath the loose folds of his fur. A sound rose from deep within him, a low warning bark that vibrated like thunder rolling beneath the floor. Logan straightened. Raven only made that sound when something mattered, when something hidden pressed against the world from behind a wall. The Bloodhound surged forward, nails scraping against the concrete, nose pressed to the back wall of the unit. He sniffed again, harder this time, breath loud and urgent. Logan knelt beside him, running the light over the wall. It looked ordinary, but too clean, too straight. He whispered, "What is it, partner?" Raven didn't move. In the silence, Logan felt something shift inside him. Not fear, but recognition, the kind that echoes when life decides to turn a sharp corner. His hand tightened around the crowbar. He slid the metal under the seam and pulled. The concrete gave way with a cough of dust, breaking not like stone but like something built to open. A hidden panel. A breath of cold air spilled out, colder than the night outside. It smelled of old paper, damp wood, and secrets sealed too long. Logan lifted the panel fully, revealing a dark cavity, deep enough to hide a life, quiet enough to bury one. Raven stepped back, but did not look away. His tail lowered, his breath slowed. Something inside that darkness had weight. Logan raised the light. There, a wooden box sealed with red wax, edges chipped but intact. Beside it, a weathered bundle of documents tied with string hardened by time. A metal military case, dented. And on top, a black envelope with a name written in steady, deliberate ink. Isaac Merrick. The letters felt alive, heavy. Logan swallowed. He didn't know the man, but the name struck him with a quiet force, like a chord he had heard before in some distant room. He reached for the envelope, fingertips trembling slightly, the cold from the hidden space seeping into his skin. Raven sat at his feet, head tilted, ears lifted, breath calm but watchful. The dog's gaze didn't leave the envelope, as if he understood that this was the hinge on which the night would turn. Logan whispered to the empty unit, "What were you trying to hide?" No answer came, only the soft hum of the fluorescent light outside. But something in Logan's chest tightened, a sense that this was no accident, no forgotten box. It was a message trapped in dust, waiting for the right pair of hands. And as he stood there, holding that black envelope, Logan understood with quiet certainty that his life had just stepped across a threshold it could never return from. The night wasn't done with him yet. A soft rain tapped against the metal roof, gentle and steady, as if the night were trying to ease someone into the truth. Logan stood in the dim storage unit, the mist curling around the doorway like a tired ghost. The black envelope rested in his hand, its paper thick, worn, and strangely warm, as though the words inside had been waiting for breath, for touch, for a witness. Raven sat close beside him, reddish-brown fur brushing the floor, his heavy ears lowering in quiet patience. When Logan broke the wax seal, the air shifted. It smelled of ink, old grief, and a man's final attempt to hold on to hope. The letter was written in a slow, almost trembling hand. Isaac Merrick, 48 when he died, a thin man with salt-brown hair and a quiet, meticulous presence, described himself not through pride, but through exhaustion. A scientist, a father, someone who had tried to protect land, water, and people who would never know his name. He wrote about soil samples, poison buried under polished promises, and a corporation powerful enough to drown the truth beneath concrete and lies. As Logan read, he felt the man behind the words. Tired, frightened, alone. Rain tapped harder. Raven shifted closer, sensing the weight pressing into Logan's chest. The second page changed everything. Isaac confessed he had uncovered a deliberate cover-up. The Kincaid Holdings contamination, the falsified reports, the intimidation that grew colder each time he refused to bend. He wrote about footsteps following him home, shadows lingering outside his lab, and a voice warning him that accidents happen to stubborn men. Logan imagined the engineer, thin frame hunched over a desk, vest pockets full of notes, hands shaking as he locked documents away. Isaac's final days weren't defined by cowardice, but by a quiet, relentless courage no one had honored. And then came the truth that tightened Logan's throat. The explosion that killed Isaac Merrick was no accident, not a malfunction, a murder dressed as misfortune. Logan's breath slowed. His fingers tightened around the paper. The mist outside grew thicker, as if the world itself held its breath. He had seen men die. He had seen lies win, but he had never held a dead man's voice in his hands. Raven nudged his knee gently, a soft, steadying reminder that Logan didn't have to carry this alone. The last lines were uneven, ink thinning, as if Isaac were running out of time or light. If anyone finds this, please take the truth to my daughter, Sierra. She deserves to know why her father never came home. Logan closed his eyes for a moment. Sierra Merrick, 31 now, with a tired determination in her face he had only seen once from afar, had lived 10 years believing her father's death was an accident of fate. How many nights had she mourned a lie? How many memories had she carried alone? Logan folded the letter carefully, the rain softening outside, as though listening. He wasn't rich, powerful, or fearless, but he wore a badge. And that meant something. When he rose, Raven stood with him, tail lowering in a solemn vow. The dog licked Logan's hand, a quiet, wordless promise that wherever this truth led, they would walk toward it together. Logan whispered into the cold air, "You're not forgotten, Isaac. I'll carry this." A small, steady flame lit inside him. And for the first time that night, Logan felt purpose warm his tired bones. The morning light was pale and thin, drifting through the bare branches like a memory that had not yet decided to stay or leave. Logan waited on a wooden bench in the quiet corner of the park, hands resting loosely in his lap. His tall, lean frame looked even more tired in daylight, the faded navy shirt wrinkled from a long night without sleep. Raven lay at his feet, reddish-brown fur warm against the cold ground, breathing slow and steady. The letter from Isaac weighed inside Logan's jacket like a heartbeat, not his own. When Sierra approached, he stood. She was 31, slight but steady, dressed in a soft beige sweater and dark blue jeans, hair pulled back in a practical knot. There was a quiet strength in her presence, the kind built from years of surviving a truth she had never been given. Her voice was soft, almost careful. "You said it was about my father?" Logan nodded and handed her the letter. She held it with both hands as if afraid it might break. Sierra's breath caught the moment she saw the handwriting. Her father's loops and curves, familiar even after a decade of absence, seemed to lift from the page like a ghost stepping back into light. When she read the first lines, her shoulders trembled. By the third paragraph, tears slipped silently down her face, falling onto her sweater like small, surrendered truths. Raven raised his head, watching her with quiet concern, sensing grief the way only an old dog can, through breath and stillness. "I knew something was wrong," Sierra whispered, voice cracking. "No one believed me, not the police, not anyone." Logan listened, letting her grief settle between them. He didn't speak. Sometimes a man didn't need words, just presence, steady as a hand on a shoulder. The wind rustled the dry leaves around their feet. A distant lawnmower hummed. Life went on, unaware of the moment the world broke open for a daughter who had waited 10 years for the truth. Then Raven stiffened, his ears lifted, his body shifted back. 3 sharp barks, quick, clipped, urgent. Logan felt the air change. He turned, scanning the park. At the far end, half hidden by a row of untrimmed bushes, sat a black SUV with no headlights on. Dark windows. Engine low, but running. A presence more felt than seen. Behind the wheel was Jonas Mercer, 43, broad-shouldered, thick-necked, jaw set like carved stone. His black leather jacket clung to him like armor. He had the look of a man who did not question orders, only executed them. Men like Jonas were born in shadows and lived comfortably there. Logan's heart tightened. "Sierra," he murmured, "we need to move. Now." He grabbed her hand and started toward the path. Raven fell behind them, blocking the line of sight. The SUV crept forward, tires rolling silently over the asphalt. Logan's breath chilled. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had been watching. They cut between 2 narrow rows of old brick houses, a walkway too tight for any vehicle. Raven led, choosing the sharp turns with practiced instinct. Behind them, the SUV revved in frustration, engine snarling like something caged. Only when they were deep in the alley's twists did Sierra finally speak, voice shaking but clear. "They're after you, because of the letter." Logan didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. She already knew the truth. The moment he touched Isaac's secret, Logan Briggs had stopped being invisible. Night settled slowly over the city, pressing a cool stillness into the narrow streets like a hand laid gently over a restless heart. Logan guided Sierra along the quiet sidewalks, his tall, lean frame moving with a purpose softened only by caution. The faded navy shirt clung to his shoulders, dampened by the humid night. Sierra walked beside him, small and steady, her beige sweater hugging her arms as though trying to provide the warmth her trembling voice could not. Raven padded ahead, reddish-brown fur glowing faintly under the weak streetlights. The Bloodhound paused often, nose lifted, breath deep, listening to the night in ways only an old dog could. They could not go to the precinct. Logan knew there were men inside who had accepted Richard Kincaid's money, men who smiled easily, but walked with the weight of secrets. He had seen enough whispers behind closed doors to understand danger did not always come from outside. So he chose the only place untouched by familiar eyes, the same forgotten storage unit where this all began. Sierra looked confused when they reached the rusted door, fog curling around their feet like lost smoke. "This place?" she asked. Logan nodded. "It's safer than the station." The wind rattled the metal siding like an old man, clearing his throat. Inside, the air smelled of dust and cold metal again, as if time itself had paused since the moment they left. Raven circled once, then settled at the entrance, ears lifted, guarding them with quiet vigilance. Sierra wrapped her arms tightly around herself, the weight of the letter still heavy in her pocket. Her eyes shifted across the shadows, lost, shaken, untethered. Logan knelt beside an overturned crate, lighting the lantern he had found earlier. The soft glow cast warm circles on the walls, revealing the hidden compartment and the scattered evidence of Isaac's truth. Sierra's breath wavered. She finally whispered, "I don't know where to go, or who to trust. Everything I believed in is gone." Logan leaned back, thoughtful. His voice, when it came, was steady, but worn at the edges. "I know what that feels like." She looked at him, confusion flickering through her tears. He hesitated a moment, long enough for the lantern flame to flicker, before admitting quietly, "My mom's sick, needs medicine I can't afford, and I don't have much else. Not really." Sierra swallowed hard, pain softening her features. "And yet, you still helped me?" Logan shook his head gently. "I'm not helping you, Sierra. I'm helping justice, the kind your father was owed." Her eyes filled again, but this time not from grief. Something warmer trembled there, recognition, gratitude, the fragile beginning of faith. Raven lifted his head, ears twitching at a distant sound. The night outside tightened, like a breath held too long. Logan felt it too, the subtle shift in the air, the unspoken warning in Raven's posture. The world beyond, the thin walls had not forgotten them. But inside this small, cold space, something else had awakened. Two people who had entered as strangers now shared something difficult to name. A quiet pact forged from loss, courage, and the truth buried in a dead man's letter. Sierra touched the folded pages in her pocket and whispered, as if to herself, "Thank you for not walking away." Logan didn't answer. He simply nodded, letting the stillness of the moment settle gently over them. In the hush of the dim lantern light, they were no longer alone in their battles. They had become allies, bound not by blood, but by the fragile, stubborn hope that justice still mattered. A thin draft slipped under the storage door, carrying the scent of cold asphalt and distant rain. Logan set the metal box on the concrete floor, its weight ringing faintly in his bones. The lantern flickered, casting soft amber halos along the walls and tracing the lines of fatigue carved into his face. Raven paced in a slow circle, the bloodhound's reddish-brown fur brushing the ground, ears low, breaths deep. He kept returning to the box, sniffing with a restless urgency, as if memory itself were trapped inside. Sierra knelt beside Logan, her hands trembling slightly as she brushed dust from the dented lid. She looked small in the lantern glow, sweater sleeves pulled past her wrists, the residue of tears drying slowly on her cheeks. Logan tried several combinations, dates he thought Isaac might use. Raven's tail twitched anxiously. Nothing opened. The silence in the room thickened, filled only by the soft hum of the lantern and the distant mutter of wind scraping the siding. Sierra leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Try my birthday," she said. Logan hesitated. Then he entered the numbers. A sharp metallic click broke the stillness, loud as a cracking bone. The lid lifted with a slow groan. Inside, wrapped in layers of plastic and wax, lay the kind of truth that should never have needed hiding. Sierra reached in first. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded a stack of glossy satellite photos. Land patches edited into false emerald green, rivers brightened unnaturally, poison disguised beneath color. Beneath the photos lay the real environmental reports, pages yellowed at the edges, stamped, signed, and heavy with data no corporation could scrub clean. Logan lifted a folded map next, its creases sharp, ink slightly smeared. Red circles marked parcels of land, purchased quietly, cheaply, as if to bury them beneath concrete. And then the final document, a single sheet, thinner than the rest, typed with cold precision. Order. Resolve Isaac Merrick. Immediate. At the bottom, Jonas Mercer's signature. Sierra's breath broke. She pressed her hand to her mouth, shoulders curling inward as if trying to keep from collapsing. Logan's chest tightened. He moved behind her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder, light but unwavering. Raven stepped close, nudging his heavy head against Sierra's knee, his warmth grounding her in the moment. Sierra lifted the page again, tears falling silently onto the ink. "They killed him?" she whispered, voice thin and shaking. "They actually killed him?" Logan swallowed hard. He had known, or maybe he hadn't, but some part of him had braced for this truth. Still, seeing the evidence laid bare felt like stepping into a cold river, the shock stealing his breath. He knelt beside her, looking at the spread of papers on the floor. The lies, the greed, the cruelty, and the man who had tried to stand against it, buried under the weight of power. Sierra wiped her face with the back of her hand. Her voice, when it returned, carried a quiet steel. "We have everything we need." Logan nodded slowly. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the metal door, but inside the storage unit, something steadier took hold. Truth. Burdened, painful, but clean. And in the hush of that small room, surrounded by evidence of a good man's fall, the three of them, Logan, Sierra, and Raven, understood that they were no longer running. They were standing. Together. Morning light pressed softly against the windows of the federal annex, pale and cool like breath on glass. Logan waited in the hallway with Raven resting at his feet, the Bloodhound's reddish-brown coat rising gently with each slow breath. The building smelled of old paper, metal vents, and the faint bitterness of burnt coffee, a smell that pulled him back to years of quiet, thankless patrols. Sierra stood beside him, sweater sleeves pulled down, hands clasped tight, trying to hold herself together. Then Agent Callum Hayes stepped out to greet them. Callum was a man in his mid-40s, tall and lean, wearing a government-issue suit that looked like it had seen too many overnight shifts. Gray touched his temples. His voice, usually firm, thinned when he looked at the metal box Logan carried. He motioned them inside his office. There, beneath a single desk lamp, Logan laid out the documents. The edited satellite images, the toxicology reports, the maps, the ledger of bribes. Callum read each page slowly, lips tightening. When he reached the order signed by Jonas Mercer, his hand stopped mid-air. The paper rattled between his fingers. "We can bring down an empire with this," he whispered. Logan felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, not triumph exactly, but something like breath returning to an old wound. They didn't wait. Callum arranged a mandatory review with Richard Kincaid in a private legal suite downtown, neutral territory, all glass walls and polished wood that smelled faintly of cedar. Kincaid arrived in a tailored suit, a man in his 50s built on arrogance and money. His smirk appeared before he sat down. "A broke street cop and his filthy mutt," he drawled. "Coming to lecture me on justice?" Raven's ears twitched, but he stayed at Logan's heel. Logan reached into his pack and placed the metal box on the table. Sierra, voice barely steady, pulled from inside it the photo of her father. Isaac Merrick, smiling in the sunlight, unaware that darkness was closing around him. Callum opened the folder and began reading the evidence aloud, his tone steady, professional, and cold as winter steel. Each sentence landed like weight on the table. Kincaid's smile began to fade around the edges. Jonas Mercer, standing behind Kincaid, shifted suddenly. His hand slipped toward his jacket. Sierra gasped softly. Logan straightened, instinct rising. But Raven moved first. The Bloodhound lunged forward, planting himself between Logan, Sierra, and Mercer. A deep guttural growl shook the glass panels. Mercer froze. Two federal security officers burst in, pinning Mercer's hands before he could draw the weapon. Sierra dropped to her knees beside Raven, arms around his neck, tears falling into his fur. Callum stepped back, breath sharp, then motioned toward Kincaid. "That's enough." Officers entered. The cuffs clicked around Kincaid's wrists, a small metallic sound, yet it felt like thunder in the quiet room. Logan looked at Sierra. Her face was wet, but her expression was steady now. Hopeful, even. Raven pressed close to them both, silent and watchful. And for the first time in a long while, Logan felt the world shift, just a little, toward the light. A warm autumn breeze moved gently through the trees, carrying the soft rustle of leaves across the memorial grounds. The city felt different in the weeks after the arrests, quieter, lighter, as if someone had opened a window in a long-shut room. Logan stood with Raven beside him, the Bloodhound's reddish-brown coat glowing under the afternoon sun. Sierra had spent days preparing the memorial for her father. Now she stood on the small stage, wearing a simple cardigan and dark jeans, her hands trembling around a paper she barely looked at. Behind her, rows of townspeople filled the folding chairs, old workers, former colleagues of Isaac, neighbors who still remembered his kindness. When Sierra began to speak, her voice wavered like a thread pulled too tight. She talked about her father's stubborn decency, his quiet humor, the long nights he spent fighting for a truth that cost him everything. Then she looked at Logan, really looked. "If not for Logan and Raven," she said, breath catching, "my father's name would still be lost in the dark." Logan lowered his head. Something in his chest loosened, something old and buried. Raven nudged his hand, as if reminding him to stand steady. Later, as people lit candles around a stone engraved with Isaac's name, Sierra stepped closer to Logan. Up close, her eyes were red, but certain. "You once told me you were poor," she whispered, "but you're the richest man I know, in courage and in the kind of honor money can't touch." Logan tried to answer, but the words caught. For 40 years, no one had ever spoken to him like that. Not at the academy, not on the streets, not even in the quiet, empty apartment he went home to every night. A tear slipped down his cheek before he could hide it. Raven pressed against his leg, warm and steady. Sierra reached out and lightly touched his arm, and Logan let himself feel grief, relief, and the quiet peace of being seen at last. In the days that followed, the city approved full medical coverage for his mother. It stunned him. He wasn't used to doors opening. He'd spent most of his life pushing them alone. Then Sierra approached him with an offer. Head of security for the new environmental restoration project. A role built on justice, on rebuilding what had once been destroyed. Logan accepted slowly, almost reverently, aware that life was giving him a second chance he never imagined he deserved. One evening, he walked through the new park built on the once poisoned land. The air smelled of fresh soil and warm grass. Raven lay in a patch of golden sunlight, while children giggled and buried their hands in his soft ears. Sierra stood beside Logan close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, softly, almost like a prayer carried on the breeze, the thought settled into Logan's heart. Justice sometimes arrives late, but when it comes, it heals even the hearts we thought had. Turn to stone. When the world feels unforgiving, remember this. One honest heart can still tip the balance toward the good. Officer Logan Briggs had almost nothing, yet chose to stand for the truth anyway. And that quiet courage gave a grieving daughter her father back. Let his journey remind you that justice may come late, but it always finds a way. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And stay with us. Your own light still matters, more than you know.